What's up, guys? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper Saturday video. Today, we are going to take a look at the Pauper ban list. Now, a lot of people have been talking about what can be added to the ban list to spice up the format, but instead, I'm going to pose the question, what could come off the ban list? And to that end, we are actually going to be making a brand new tier list. We're going to be ranking every card on the ban list to see what needed to be banned and what could probably be unbanned. So without further ado, guys, let's roll the intro and let's jump right in. All right, guys, what is going on? We are going to kick off this ban list nice and strong with a fairly recent ban. This is Aarakocra Sneak. It is a 4-mana, 1/4 bird rogue, flying, and when it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. Now, this card was banned as a batch of several initiative cards, all to do with the turn 1 initiative deck. They banned most of the fast mana colors, blue, black, and red. That was the common colors for those decks to be run. Now, that Turbo Initiative deck was primarily black, sometimes black-red for the additional fast mana that could be created from, like, Rite of Flame, but in most cases it was just black. So to that end, while I can see why they banned Aarakocra Sneak, I don't actually think that that one needed to be banned. Fairly sure that this card could still exist in the format and be okay. I'm actually going to downgrade this to I'm not sure that this needed a ban. Yeah, I think we're happy with that. Next up is Arcum's Astrolabe. Many players of Pauper are familiar with this card. This gave birth to an entire slew of Jeskai mid-range ephemerate style decks. This is a 1 snow mana artifact, and when it enters the battlefield, it draws a card, and it filters mana. Pay 1, tap it, and add a mana of any color. This card, very similar to another card, Prophetic Prism, further down on the list, really enabled mana fixing on a level that didn't really exist at the time. But now, I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably fine. Looking at things like Energy Refractor, I mean, this card just seems fine. I think for now, we're going to put Astrolabe also in the not sure pile. Maybe that'll change as we kind of go through these and my memory refreshes, but for now, I think this is going to be a little bit below Aarakocra Sneak, because I do kind of agree that some of these needed to go. I'm not sure about this one, but there are several mana fixers on this list that we'll have to look at. The next one up is Atog. This was a highly contentious ban. Atog is an Atog, and you can sacrifice an artifact and it gets +2/+2. Free my boy Atog. This card died for the sins of the bridges, and I will die on this hill. Unban my boy Atog. This card did absolutely nothing wrong, and it should be back in the format. That being said, ban the bridges, bring back Atog, let's shake Affinity up, and to that end, there's another card from Affinity on this list, Venser Sojourner, that I would love to see included in Pauper, but we'll get there later on. Next up, Bonder's Ornament. Bonder's Ornament is a 3-mana artifact. It can tap for a mana of any color, and you can pay for, and each player who controls a permanent named Bonder's Ornament draws a card. This was a Tron staple, and frankly, I just don't see this card being super good right now. Even with this card, I think Tron is a little bit too slow. I think the tools for mono red have really pushed Tron out of viability, at least in the traditional instance of Tron. Things like the Alter combo are fast enough, but Old School Flickertron really isn't doing much these days. I think that Bonder's Ornament is going to fall under the probably fine argument for now. Next up is Chatterstorm. Chatterstorm is a 2-mana sorcery. It creates a 1/1 green squirrel with Storm. This card was the cornerstone of the Chatterstorm combo deck. One of the few decks in the format, or at least in recent memory, capable of winning on turn 1. There is also the Cycle Storm turn 1 kill that is technically possible, but highly unlikely. Chatterstorm's turn 1 kill potential was actually not very hard to pull off at all. And turn 2 through 4 was incredibly consistent. Unfortunately, as much as I loved that deck, this card needed to be banned. It absolutely had to be banned. I understand why it had to go, and no complaints here. Next up is Cloud of Faeries. This card has been banned for almost the entirety of Pauper. It is a 1/1 for 2 fairy, and when it enters the battlefield, you untap 2 lands. It has flying and cycling for 2 colorless mana, but those aren't the important parts. It's that untap 2 lands. So this is a free 1/1 flying fairy for 2. This is up there with Peregrine Drake for me. I understand how it generates mana, and I understand that that can be a problem. While Peregrine Drake being 5 mana is pretty restrictive, I understand why Cloud of Faeries probably isn't okay. I think we're going to put this on an I can see why for right now. I definitely understand the reason it's banned. I'm not sure that I agree with it. It could be either of these two here for me. But for now, just for consistency and this nice even aesthetic, we're going to put this in the I can see why. Feels like either bottom of I can see why or like the top of not sure for me. Next up is Cloupost. This is a Locust. This card has been a staple in any format it's been legal in, with any other Locust that is allowed. 8-post is an incredibly good deck, and probably would be an incredibly good deck again. But I don't think that it's good enough these days. Is Cloupost really good enough at this point in time? Like, really ask yourself whether or not Cloupost is okay when things like the Urzatron lands are still legal in Pauper and not even that good. While they are very powerful, they really aren't putting up top decks. They're really not, carrying those decks. It's the combo elements underneath the Tron lands that are really doing the heavy lifting. The Tron lands are just one of those things that when it comes together, it makes the deck feel a little bit better. But most of the time you combo without it. I'm going to go with probably fine here. This might be a little contentious. I think many people who played in the 8-post era will have a problem with this. But I think that we're at a point in Pauper now where the power creep and the efficiency of the format, the premium removal, the threats have gotten exponentially better. So control decks really are struggling. Combo and aggro really have kind of taken over. And I think Cloupost is probably fine. Next up is Cranial Plating. This is an equipment. It costs 2, 1 colorless to equip, and the equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. And then you can pay 2 black to attach Cranial Plating, which allows you to do it at instant speed. If the bridges were banned, I think this card would actually be okay. But because the bridges are not banned, I can see why this isn't going to make the cut. Unfortunately, I want it to be unbannable, but it's just not. If the bridges go and Affinity really falls off, then maybe we can take a look here. But I think the first place we unban is Atog here to see if the deck needs a pick-me-up. I think a lot of people are going to say the deck is perfectly fine, doesn't need any help. I would agree. I think the deck probably is fine right now, but if we are going to finally ban the bridges, we have to understand that that's going to hugely weaken the affinity deck, and we need to give it some tools back. So I think Atog goes a long way, and maybe Cranial Plating if the artifact lands bite the dust. Next up is Daze. Daze is a instant for a blue and a colorless. You may return an island you control to its owner's hand rather than pay its cost, and then it counters target spell unless its controller pays 1. I'm getting PTSD from the blue winter of Pauper. Just reading this card and Gush later on, I'm sure will put me right back in that same headspace. Daze is 100% a card that is absolutely insane. I think this is had to ban it for me for sure. Daze is an incredibly powerful card, hugely frustrating to play against, and there's no real counterplay to speak of. You can't really play around your opponent being tapped out and still giving them credit for playable cards. So I think largely Daze caused more problems than it solved in Pauper, and definitely a hugely powerful card. I can see why it had to go, but I believe that it probably needed to be banned. Next up is Disciple of the Vault. Disciple of the Vault's a 1/1 human cleric for a single black. Whenever an artifact's put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. This was banned because Affinity was still too good. Even after the Atog ban, in combination with Makeshift Munitions, puts a huge clock on opponents and just really provides too much pressure. I think once again, Disciple the Vault falls under the category of ban the bridges and then let's talk. I can see why the Disciple is banned. Same with Cranial Plating. For now, I think that Disciple should probably stay banned, but once those bridges finally cop it, we can circle back and talk about it. Next up is Empty the Warrens. Empty the Warrens is a 4-mana sorcery. Create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens with Storm. This is just big Chatterstorm. There's no way this card doesn't need to stay banned. This is an absolute had to ban it. This card is ridiculous, and it's gotten even better with first day of class. Yeah, this card's almost certainly not okay still. Next up is Fall from Favor. This was a hugely problematic card after Commander Legends, I believe. It's a 3-mana aura, and when it enters the battlefield, tap the enchanted creature and you become the monarch, and the enchanted creature doesn't untap. This was a hugely problematic card when it was printed. However, the format has changed considerably since then, and I'm not sure this is really where a banned card has to be. Not sure about this one. I don't think that it's quite unbannable. Not sure it would be fine, but I think it's close. So for now, we're going to put this at the bottom of not sure. Definitely a card that is very, very powerful and made the format very, very stagnant while it was in. So I'm content with leaving it in the middle row here and keeping it banned. Next up is Frantic Search. This is a 3-mana instant. Draw 2, then discard 2, untap up to 3 lands. I'll be honest. Unlike the Fairy, which can be like flickered or ephemerated or, you know, any of those things to net mana or to recover mana, Frantic Search can't be. I mean, of course you can do things with like Archaeomancer, but people are already doing things with Archaeomancer for infinite mana, so admittedly, I think Frantic Search could probably come off the ban list. I think that it would give combo decks a new tool, and without all of these storm payoffs that we're keeping in this had to ban list, I think that the ability to churn through cards probably isn't hugely problematic. Realistically, you know, what are the decks this goes in? You know, this makes the cut in Familiars, but that list is already really tight, so what do you cut for it, you know? But the draw power in Pauper has just absolutely skyrocketed with things like Reckoner's Bargain and Deadly Dispute, so I think realistically it's time for Frantic Search to get another shot. Next up is Galvanic Relay. This is a sorcery that says exile the top of your library. During your next turn, you may play that card. This is a 3-mana Storm card that was part of Galvanic Relay Storm, kind of the replacement for Chatterstorm after that deck was banned out. This deck operated off of churning through its deck over and over again, using Felden's Cane to put your deck back in and keep going, and use a pinger like Kessig Fire Breather or Firebrand Archer to ping out your opponent while churning through spells and drawing through your deck. This deck was hugely consistent. It was very difficult to interact with because Felden Cane just allowed you to loop through your deck several times, so if they managed to kill or counter something, you could always just shuffle it back in and keep going. Sad to say, I can definitely see why this one had to go. I understand that it was super frustrating to play against. On a purely power level, I think that other decks are better, but I understand how difficult this one was to disrupt. So we're going to put this in the I can see why category for now. I think that this deck is definitely powerful, and this card was the key piece of that deck. I don't think that it's reasonable to ask for an unban of that. Next up is Gitaxian Probe. I mean, this card has been a staple in any format it's legal in since it was printed. This is 1 Phyrexian Blue for a sorcery. Look at target player's hand, draw a card. It's just a free draw spell. Unlike Frantic Search, this card has absolutely no downside. You don't even need the 3 mana. You can just pay 2 life, draw a card. I don't think this one could come off. I think this is probably in the not sure level with Fall from Favor. Power level wise, I think the format has grown past them. But I think for the play experience, for the decks that these cards kind of go in and help fuel, the redundancy, as well as, you know, kind of the feels bad element, I suppose, you know, looking at the element of how fun these decks are to play against. These cards are both very unfun and have very little counterplay to them, so I'm totally okay putting them in the not sure pile. I think that power level, strictly power level wise, they're probably okay, but play experience wise, they're definitely, and I can see why they're banned, so we're going to put these right in the middle at not sure. Next up is Grapeshot. Grapeshot is an absolutely insane card. It's 2 mana, deal 1 damage to any target with Storm. You know, I've had several discussions about the ban list and what the best variants of Storm would be outside of the ban list. I'm actually looking at putting together some paper games with no ban list Pauper just to see what explosive decks we can come up with. Comment below if you'd like to see that video. We're thinking about running a little tournament similar to Card Market or like Shuffle Up and Play style with Tolarian Community College and the Professor, just to kind of play out all the crazy no ban list decks we can come up with and see what the absolute best version is. So let me know if you're interested in seeing that video down below. And to that end, I think Grapeshot is probably fine. Getting to 20 Storm is a huge ask in this metagame right now. And with things like Weather the Storm, 20 damage for 20 Storm really feels like it's just going to be too slow most of the time. I'm interested in testing Grapeshot Storm in the format and seeing if it is better or worse than things like Altertron. You know, or maybe Cow combo, which is a deck that Kalikaz just came out with, or just showcased in a Pauper League. You know, the card does seem powerful, but I think that Pauper is in a point now where we could probably support a very powerful Storm deck and still be okay. Next up is Gush. Gush is a 5-mana instant that allows you to return 2 islands to their owner's hand and draw 2 cards. This card is great. This card is so good, in fact, that as I mentioned before with Daze, this is part of that blue winter deck. Absolutely incredible card. But is it fast enough? You know, I'm not actually sure that Gush is fast enough anymore. Especially with cards like Meeting of Minds, Gush is, you know, really starting to show its age, even as a free spell. I think for now, we're going to put Gush in the I can see why pile. Definitely incredibly powerful card. Another one of those cards that like really is counterintuitive to play around. Doesn't have much counterplay and doesn't really fix any problems in Pauper right now, so I'm inclined to leave it out. That one's up for discussion for me, though. Definitely could be swayed by opinions, so let me know what you think about Gush and whether or not it's too powerful the format, or if the format has caught up to it by now. Let me know down below. Next up is High Tide. This is a single blue instant, and until end of turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, you tap for an additional blue. So it just makes islands tap for double, and then you play a second one, and islands trap for triple. I actually saw a deck list on a prospective unban for this card. And I'll be honest, the deck seems really fun. It seems super difficult to pilot correctly. There's a significant skill ceiling. It seems interactable. It's definitely already targeted by a huge amount of red sideboard already. I think High Tide could probably be unbanned. I think that it would add support similar to Grapeshot to a combo deck in the format that we don't really have any of. And I think that there's meaningful interaction and enough that you can do without High Tide making the game feel unwinnable. And overall, the list and the style of deck that it promotes is very punishing and very rewarding to play. So I'm interested in enabling things of that nature. Next up is Hymn to Tourach. And as much as I would love to see Hymn to Tourach come to Pauper, I just can't imagine what would need to happen to make this card fine. This card is hugely problematic to play against in a format with things like Lotus Petal and Dark Ritual. You know, turn 1 Hymn to Tourach, your opponent can make absolutely just impossible games and huge feels bad moments. I can't imagine the format being more fun with this card in it. That being said, power level wise, discard is a strategy and just kind of a sub-theme that really has not been successful in Pauper. I mean, even things like Duress are not very popular in sideboard right now. I think that maybe Mono Black needs enough help that this is okay. But for now, I think we're going to put this at like the bottom of probably fine. No, we're going to put this at the bottom of not sure. I don't quite want to say probably fine. I think that the mono black deck can definitely use some help. I just don't think this is the card for it. Next up is Invigorate. Invigorate is another free spell, but this one is not a draw spell. It's a 3-mana instant for green and 2 colorless, and if you control a forest rather than pay its mana cost, you may have an opponent gain 3 life. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. This is for the Infect deck. And because Infect has basically been non-existent lately, even seeing iterations such as mono white Infect just to make the deck viable again, I think this could almost certainly be unbanned. I think that removal, especially with the downshift of Cast Down, which has happened since this card was banned, I think that the amount of removal and interaction the format has gotten in the form of downshifts and hyper-efficient removal means that Invigorate is almost certainly fine. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say this card could be unbanned. I think that High Tide is still the least likely could be unbanned, but Invigorate and Frantic Inventory or Frantic Search, definitely interesting cards, and I'm down to test them out. I don't think that the format can't handle them. Next up is Mystic Sanctuary. Mystic Sanctuary was a card that was included in several grindier control decks and gave birth to a loop. There is a counter spell that is 2 blue, counter target spell, and return a land you control. Because this is also an island, combining it with things like Gush and Daze become hugely problematic. But without either of those in the format, and format being very, very fast now, I don't think this is a had to ban it. I understand why it was banned. I can definitely see why it was banned at the time. This one's tough for me. I think that when it was banned, it needed to be banned. So we'll put it at the bottom of needed to be banned, I think. The card is incredibly powerful. It loops with so many things, especially when you look at things like Gush, like Foil, like Daze. Foil is not banned, but another Islands Matter type card. And all in all, I think it's almost certainly too powerful. So we're gonna keep it in the had to ban it pile. I think that's where it belongs, and the card is very, very strong. Yeah. Okay. Next up is Peregrine Drake. This is a 2/3 flying Drake for 5 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you untap 5 lands. This is a hugely powerful combo card. This makes huge amounts of mana. It can go infinite with several combinations of like Ghostly Flicker and things like that. At the end of the day, 5 mana is a lot for something that dies to a lightning bolt. Honestly not sure about this one. I think that's where it should go. I want to say it's probably fine, but at the end of the day, I'm just not sure. I think this belongs in the kind of the middle ground, where I can totally understand why it was banned. But the power level and the creep has definitely gotten to a point now where a 2/3 for 5 just really doesn't seem that good to me. The ability is obviously very, very powerful, but there's several infinite mana combos that are operating faster than this, so not sure. But we're gonna leave it right there. Next up is Pradish Gypsies. This is a card banned for problematic reasons, not for power level. Now, obviously, on power level alone, this could absolutely be unbanned. It's not a problem, but I can totally see why this card is banned. No arguments here. Next up is Prophetic Prism. This is a 2-mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and 1 mana tap it, add 1 mana of any color. Definitely looks very similar to this Arcum's Astrolabe. However, there's one small difference in that Astrolabe costs 1 and Prophetic Prism costs 2. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge deal, but I think that in this format, your turn 1 is going to be a lot less taxing than your turn 2. And when compared to things like Energy Refractor, I think Prophetic Prism is probably fine. So that's where it... Oops. I think Prophetic Prism is probably fine, so that's where it's going to go. We're going to slam this right into the probably fine category. Would really like to see Prophetic Prism come back to Pauper. I don't think it's problematic. I think it would be just fine. I'm tempted to put that in like the could be unbanned category. I think it could go either way there. But for right now, I think we're going to leave it there. Next up is Sinkhole. Sinkhole is a double black sorcery, destroy target land. Mono black actually has a ton of destroy lands at 3 mana. And Reign of Tears, their generic 3 mana destroy target land, isn't actually legal, but you have 2 or 3 other versions of 3 mana black land destruction that is all legal and is all fine. I think Sinkhole could almost certainly be unbanned. I don't think 2 black is going to be played all that often outside of mono black. And even with things like Dark Ritual, I just don't see this card being problematic, because if you were going to Dark Ritual into a land destruction spell, you can do it already. So this seems fine. Definitely could be unbanned. I don't think it would be that big a deal. Next up is Sojourner's Companion. This is another Myr Enforcer, but it's a Salamander. So this is a 4/4 for 7 with affinity for artifacts, and it has artifact land cycling. This came from Modern Horizons. I think by and large this card is actually fine. But again, it's one of those situations with like Disciple the Vault and Cranial Plating where we would need to unban, or we would need to ban something else from affinity and then unban this. I want to say this is probably fine, especially these days. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to say it. I'm going to say this card's probably fine in the format as it stands right now. I think that once we ban Bridges, this is immediately unbanned. I don't think there's any reason to keep that card banned once the Bridges are gone. Let Affinity have its Myr Enforcers. Next up is Stirring Bard. Stirring Bard is a 0/4 defender. When it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative, and it can tap target. It can tap to give target creature menace and haste until end of turn. This is 4 mana for a 0/4 Dragon Bard. This was banned, as I mentioned previously, with Aarakocra Sneak and the other 2 mono black initiative cards. Unlike the other 3, this one is incapable of attacking for itself as it has Defender. And it's also it's the least aggressive in the most aggressive color. I'm going to be honest, I think this card could absolutely be unbanned and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. The reason that the black ones were so good was because you could run them in a mono black shell and have a huge amount of redundancy because you had 4 4-drops and 4 5-drops all in the mono black deck. And then if you ran the blue variant, or even just like Jeskai Ephemerate, Aarakocra Sneak fit right into that deck. It was Very difficult to interact with because you can just flicker it over and over again, and it was a huge win condition. So, and I can see why I'm not sure Aarakocra Sneak would be okay. The 2 black ones I totally understand, but the red one, Stirring Bard here, I think this could certainly come back and be totally unproblematic. Next up is Stone Throwing Devils. This is another older card that was not banned because of power level. This was banned for problematic reasons and intentions behind the card. Stereotypes being portrayed, those kind of things. And obviously I can see why, so no argument here. We're just going to move right along. Next up is Temporal Fissure. This is a 5-mana sorcery that says return target permanent to its owner's hand with Storm. Now, this is the point where I think Storm can have its payoff. I think Grapeshot is probably fine. I think Temporal Fissure is definitely fine. I think that... I mean, I'm nervous to commit to this, but I really think that Temporal Fissure is like one of the worst Storm payoffs. And I hesitate to say that it could definitely be unbanned, but I'm interested to see the deck that this goes in that isn't too slow. Because 5 mana is a lot as a Storm payoff that doesn't kill immediately. And if that's all your Storm deck is doing, how do you kill them? Even if you bounce their whole board and reset them, like if they're not dead, they can just start playing stuff again. Yeah, I think Temporal Fissure could be unbanned. I'm gonna say it. I think this card is probably fine. The format has come a long way, and I think Storm is much less problematic than it was previously. I think that, this is, as Storm payoff goes, fairly low impact. It's not killing them right away. Yeah, I'm down to see where that takes us. Next up is Treasure Cruise. Treasure Cruise is an absolutely insane Magic card, even in Cube. This card is bonkers. It is a 7 and a blue for a sorcery with Delve. You can exile cards from your graveyard to cast its colorless mana cost, and then draw 3 cards. So this is, or can be, a 1 mana draw 3. Most of the time this is like a 2 or 3 mana draw 3. But the fact that it can be a 1 mana draw 3 is hugely impactful. I think I can definitely see why this card is banned. Yeah, this card seems incredibly powerful and is one of the single best reverses of Fortune. Like, this is one of the best stabilizing engines that the format has seen in a long time. So I'm content to say I can see why this is banned, and I don't see any reason to change that. Next up is Underdark Explorer. This is a 5/3 menace that starts the initiative, and it's a 5 mana Lizard Warrior. This is the 5 mana black initiative creature, and it absolutely had to be banned. Turn 1 initiative was a hugely problematic deck, and for the same reason, Vicious Battlerager, the 4 mana 1/5, also absolutely had to be banned. And that is actually going to round out my tier list. Let me know what you guys thought down below. I'd love to hear your opinions on what I deemed could be unbanned and what you think about it. I'd love to see your guys' tier lists as well, so I'm actually going to link to this tier list down in the comments. Screenshot them at me on Twitter, send them to me on Instagram. I'd love to have a conversation and see what you guys think about the power level of the banned list in general, how strong these cards are, what you think can come off of it. And as usual, guys, thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit the notification bell. I've seen a huge number of people who follow the channel say that they don't get notified of my videos, so make sure you're hitting that bell. And As usual, guys, goodbye forever, unless I see you next time. Peace out.